Alrighty, I have my yeast, water, and a little bit of honey in the mixing bowl, just letting the instant yeast get a little bubbly on top. I'm going to go ahead and melt butter, and I'm doing about half a cup because I'm making a pretty big recipe. I will put the recipe in the comments below. You can see my little girls enjoying playing with blocks on the floor. Alright, so the reason that this bread is called double cheese bread is because not only does it have like regular grated cheese in it, it also has cottage cheese, which I blend and then put into it. The reason I had the idea to use the cottage cheese is because I was wanting to have a little more protein in the bread, as well as maybe have a little bit of a softer bread, because sometimes it's hard for me to get it baked thoroughly without it being too dry and crumbly. So this worked really well. So I'm just putting in a couple of eggs, the melted butter, obviously putting it into the mixing bowl, and then I'm going to put in just a little bit of the cottage cheese, but the cottage cheese is pretty cold, so I'm going to just put in some of it and then mix it around and then add some of the flour and then put in the rest of the cottage cheese. And there's a little bit of water that I put in the cottage cheese mixture just to make it a little bit more blendable, so it wouldn't be too hard for my blender. Okay, so now I'm going to put in probably about 2 cups of flour and give that all a good mix. That way I know that the yeast isn't getting so cold that it dies from the cottage cheese, and the eggs are also kind of cold because I forgot to take them out earlier. So there's that, and then I'm going to let the dough hook mix that up for a bit. Maybe I should have left the beaters in for that part, but I didn't. Then I'm going to add the rest of the cottage cheese, and I'm going to add the rest of the flour. Now I'm going to scrape down the sides to make sure all the flour is getting mixed in before I go ahead and add the rest of that flour. I'm also going to put in a little bit of salt and some honey, probably about a tablespoon or so, just to help the yeast have more to eat while it's growing. And then I'm adding the flour there, and I'm going to give that all a good mix. I put it on high speed so that you don't have to sit there and watch it the whole time, but I think it does look kind of neat. Okay, so here's the dough before I let it rise. That's about the consistency that it should be. Okay, so fast forward and it's been a couple hours, and that's how much the dough has risen. So I'm going to go ahead and knead it now, and I'm probably going to add a good bit of flour because it was pretty moist when I started. So there we go. I'm just putting it out onto the flour, and I shall knead.
Lord, I am fondly, earnestly longing into thy holy likeness to grow, thirsting for more and deeper communion, yearning thy love more fully to know. Open the wells of grace and salvation. Pour the rich streams deep into my heart. Cleanse and refine my thought and affection. Seal me and make me pure as thou art.
I'm planning to make 3 loaves, so I divided this into 3 chunks of dough, and now I'm going to roll it out. Doesn't really matter exactly, like it doesn't have to be an exact shape, but I'm basically just kind of making it ovals so that I can sprinkle the cheese on top, and it's okay if the sides aren't perfect. Those are just going to be folded in anyway. So that's what I'm doing here. My brother came up while I was doing this to visit me, so we were chatting while I was working, and that was fun. You can use really any cheese you want for this. I had like some pepper jack grated cheese, probably like a Colby or something, or a Colby mixture. But that's what I'm going to use for this, and I thought it turned out really well and gave it just a little bit of spice, but you can use whatever kind of cheese that you like. I did not grease my pans. I just put a tiny bit of flour on the bottom, and I thought it worked really well. It might have worked a tiny bit better if I'd put a little butter on the bottom just where I put the flour, but it worked fine as it was. So now I'm just going to put on the cheese, and I guess you can put on different amounts. I didn't measure the amount of cheese that I used, but what you can see here I think worked really well in the end. I like my bread pretty cheesy though, so I guess maybe keep that in mind when you're doing yours. So there we go. Looks like I ended up having just about the perfect amount of cheese, so that was great. I do really appreciate using grated cheese, especially while having a little one, buying it pre-grated, but I don't like it to have unnatural mold inhibitors on it, so I try to buy it when it says that it has natamycin in it because that's supposed to be a more natural mold inhibitor. I'm saying like when the ingredient label says that. Okay, so I'm just kind of spreading out the cheese a little bit so that it's basically all in the middle but gives at least an inch barrier all the way around. The side where I'm going to start rolling, I spread the cheese almost all the way to the edge, and the end where I'm going to finish, I leave about 2 inches. And then I'm just going to fold up the sides so that the cheese stays in better and just carefully roll it forward and don't stretch too hard like there. I almost tore it. And then you just press the end together and stick it in the loaf pan. It looks sort of like a cinnamon roll, but it does taste like cheesy bread when it's done. And then I just make sure to press it into the pan just to make it turn out as a little nicer shape of a loaf. And there I messed up and I started rolling before I folded in the edges, but it's okay. In the end, the bread still turned out great.
Dear Lord, take up the tangled strands where we have wrought in vain, that by the skill of thy dear hands some beauty may remain. Transformed by grace divine, the glory shall be thine. To thy most holy will, Lord, we now are all resigned.
I was thinking that our lives are a lot like bread. The Lord shapes us and molds us and gives us opportunity to grow, and then kneads us and teaches us lessons, and then really does guide our lives, even though we definitely make choices in it that determine the story of our lives. But the Lord puts boundaries, and we are very thankful for them. Okay, so I did bake the bread at 350, but I forgot to time it, so I would just suggest checking it after about 25 minutes and then sticking a knife in, like a serrated knife or something, so you can see if the bread is done, if the batter sticks to it, or I should say, if there's any batter sticking to it, then you know it's not done, and if it comes out clean, then it is. So there it is. It turned out beautifully, and it was so delicious. Thank you all so much for coming and watching, and I'll hope to see you next time.